North Carolina leads the all-time series. The Duke seniors 6-2 against North Carolina. So for those of you on ESPNU, the Cameron Crazies have fun above the rim on ESPN2. And for the 221st time, Carolina and Duke, let's play on all the networks, shall we? Here we go.
Welcome to another podcast from InsideCarolina.com, the independent voice of UNC sports. Brought to you by JohnnyT-Shirt.com, the go-to provider for all your Tar Heel gear.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. What is good? We're glad to have you here on another episode of The Throwback on Inside Carolina, InsideCarolina.com. I'm your host, Joey Powell, and you're here for episode 6, and we're glad you're with us. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to another episode of this show and to consume Inside Carolina content. And we want to ask a favor of you. You've gotten this far. We want to ask you to come a little farther, as Andy Dufresne says in Shawshank Redemption. I want you to just take some time and rate and review this podcast if you like us. If you like us, give us a good review. If you don't like it, let us know. We're accessible via the Inside Carolina message boards. We want to make sure that the content that we're putting out for you guys is what you want to hear and that it's things that you like and stuff that you can get really jazzed about. I know that right now there's not any live sports going on, and that'll change. But either way, we want to make sure that the content that we're putting out is relevant for you all. It's something that you're getting, geeked about, you're getting hyped up about. It's something you look forward to listen to. So take that time. Let us know if you don't like it. But if you do, we'll set some expectations. If you can review us and rate us, we'll continue to give you some good product and some good content. That's the name of the game. At least it is here on Inside Carolina Podcasts. Today I've got with me Dewey Burke and Sherrell McMillan. They're going to be here in just a few seconds to help us break down the 2006 matchup between the North Carolina Tar Heels at Cameron Indoor Stadium against a really, really loaded and highly ranked and highly Devil team. If you're listening to this show, you're obviously a big fan of Carolina, and you've probably got some Tar Heel gear. You may have worn some gear to that game in Cameron in 2006. Maybe you bought some gear afterwards, when you rushed Franklin Street. But either way, if you're thinking about Carolina gear, I want you to be thinking about Johnny T-Shirt and our friends at Johnny T-Shirt, JohnnyT-Shirt.com. Right now, all of the local businesses that you patron need your help. Johnny T-Shirt is no different. They're a longtime supporter of Inside Carolina and supporter of the content that we put out and supporter of this podcast. So we'll hope that you'll continue to support them. Go to JohnnyT-Shirt.com. They can get stuff shipped to you really quick. Things are always going on sale. They usually have more stuff that you can think of as far as different types of Carolina gear, clothes, koozies, indoor basketball goals. If you've got a kid that's trying to get his last dance Jumpman impression on, go to JohnnyT-Shirt.com, make that happen. So what was happening on March 4th, 2006? Well, if you remember the year before, the Tar Heels had won the national title, and they'd kind of reloaded. And when I say they reloaded, they had brought in a large recruiting class. It was 5 guys at the time, but they had to replace the top 7 scorers from that national title team. And, they had 5 freshmen that were playing regular minutes. They came into this game having lost their matchup in the Smith Center to Duke earlier that year by 4. But since then, they had won 6 straight, including 9 of 10. And they were coming in ranked number 15 and 13, depending on which poll we were looking at the time. And they were 21-6. Flip side, if you remember anything at all about 2006, you could not get away from this Duke team. People were talking about, are they going to run the table in the ACC? Blah, blah, blah. They were preseason number 1, and rightfully so. They were loaded with J.J. Redick and Sheldon Williams. They had a senior, Lee Melchione. I think Sean Dockery was also a senior. But anyway, they had just lost their first game in conference at FSU 3 days prior. And were coming in, they were 27-2. Coach K's got his 4 captains or what have you. All the hype in the world. If you need any more hype, Dick Vitale and Brad Nessler were on the call, so you had all of it. Take it a step further, Carl Hess, TV Teddy, and Ray Natilio on the call as far as refereeing the game. And I'll give you the starters real quick before I bring the guys in here. Starters for UNC, Reyshawn Terry, David Noel, Tyler Hansbrough, Bobby Frasor, and Wes Miller. Duke tried it out. Redick, Lee Melchione, Sean Dockery, and Greg Paulus. So with that said, I'm going to bring in some guys that are really going to jazz this up because you don't want to hear me the whole time. I would like to introduce to you folks, you know him as Biscuits. Dewey Burke is here. Dewey, how you doing?
Joe, I'm great. Looking forward to reflecting back on this game. I remember it very, very well, and was fortunate enough to be in the building on the bench, and got a lot of fond memories from the days leading up to it, the game itself, the locker room, and after. So looking forward to talking about it.
Yeah, man, you had one of the best seats to be had in that game, that's for sure. And also with us again today is Sherrell McMillan. Relly Mac, as I like to call him. We go way back. Sherrell, how you doing, bud?
I'm good. Yourself, man?
Hey, man. If I was any better, there'd be two of me, and I don't think the world or the listening audience is ready for that. Boys, we've got a heck of a game here. Anytime Duke and Carolina lock horns, it's going to be a barn burner. Use all the cliches you want to use. No love lost. Throw the records away. Whatever. But Dewey, you started off a second ago, kind of when we introduced you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you remember about the run up to this game? From a team perspective, from a player's perspective, what can you remember much about kind of where this team was going the Saturday that you guys traveled over to?
Yeah, it was interesting because we had gone through our little slump that year where we lost 3 out of 4, and with such a young team, it felt like the world was going to end. And we had such good leadership. We were so lucky to have David Noel to kind of steady the ship along with Coach Williams as somebody who had been there, who obviously had played huge minutes in huge games the year before and won a ring. And we really honestly looked to him more than ever during that period when we struggled, just because it never happened to especially the freshmen who were just getting their feet wet, really. And so we had come out of that and started to play better. And I just remember there being a sense in the practices leading up, and Coach Williams made a point of talking about it when we were just us together as a team, that no one thought we could win over there. Just nobody. And I remember having a steely resolve about ourselves because of that. And there was so much hype. It was JJ and Sheldon's last game, senior night. They were the 1 seed. There was talk they could have been undefeated in the conference coming in. Obviously, as you said, they lost to Florida State. So much hype around it. And that was a team that was certainly a favorite, if not the favorite, to win the national championship that year. And we were just Carolina with a bunch of freshmen. And obviously, we had already played way better that year than anybody ever thought we could have. And like I said, I just remember the Thursday, Friday before that, this kind of feeling of anticipation. Like we knew we were going to win. It was interesting. And I'll tell you a cool story about that later, but I don't know why or what it was, or we knew we were going to win. And Coach Williams kept talking about, no one thinks we can do it, but this group right here, the 15 of you guys and the coaches and the managers, no one else outside of here thinks we can do this. And that motivational tactic really worked, because by the time we got over there, I promise you guys, we knew we were going to win.
How amazing would it be if a 19-year-old freshman from Missouri helped pull a shocker for the youth bunch, the youth group of Carolina here on senior night in front of all these Duke fans and all these All-America type players. Williams misses 2 free throws, that time 3 in a row now.
And that means you're a little tired right there, because you shoot with your legs as well. Look at the entry inside.
Great entry pass, and now Ginyard will go to the free throw line.
They are just the aggressor. They're beating them to the basket. Great cuts. This is a basketball team that has elevated its game and has gotten better and better and better. Duke looks a little bit wobbly, and they have looked that way even in some of the games that they were able to win lately.
That's so awesome here, that you've got a coach that's a Hall of Famer that can get you guys that psyched up to where it's all but a foregone conclusion that the underdog is going to walk in there and walk out a win. That's beautiful. Rel, what do you remember about the game prior to, before the rewatch, but, in 2006, what is Rel thinking about this game?
They don't have a chance to win. Sorry, Dewey. But to your point, I don't think anyone really on the outside.
Damn, Rel.
No one on the outside really, even Carolina students or people who worked in the athletic department at the time,
Yeah, that's true.
thought that North Carolina could go into Cameron, a place they hadn't won at that point in 5 years, go in there and beat on senior night, one of the all-time leading scorers or the all-time leading scorer in Duke history, the guy with the most blocks in Duke history, a team that, like Dewey said, was the number one overall or number one seed in the ACC tournament and was ranked number one, especially a team.
And by the way, they had 7 McDonald's All-Americans on their team. Now we had a ton, we had a bunch too, but they had 7.
Right. And we forget, like, Josh McRoberts was on that team, and some people had him ranked number one in his class.
Yeah.
So you have all that going against North Carolina. And then, as Dewey said, it's like this, I hate to say it, but like this ragtag group of freshmen led by David Noel coming in, who I think the year before averaged like 4 points a game and was Carolina's leading returning scorer. So it just didn't seem like something that could happen, even though, they play them really tough in the Smith Center. Duke got a big, and Carolina made a pretty nice comeback, but came up just a little bit short. It seemed like one of those where, okay, they'll hang around, they'll play okay, and then eventually, JJ Redick will hit a couple threes, Sheldon Williams will get a block, and Duke will win by 9 or 10 or something like that. So that's kind of where I was going into it. They had already, as Dewey said, like kind of surpassed everybody's expectations, and at that point, it was more so it was a want to, not a must have, just because of how well they played the rest of the season.
Well, I told you to throw the records out when these two teams get together. I said that, and you just ignored me. I think both of you guys have kind of captured where probably a lot of Carolina fans fall for the Duke Carolina game. You've got half the fans think that UNC is going to walk in and just steamroll whoever they're playing, and most of the times, especially in a rivalry game like this, they're going to beat Duke no matter what. And then you have the other Carolina fans who think that there's just no chance, come hell or high water, that UNC should even be on the court, yada, yada. So I love that you guys brought that dichotomy to the conversation. Sherrell, what do you immediately in the rewatch, what major events of this game jumped out at you?
That I have forgotten, or just in general?
Just in general. I mean, if you've got a little of both, some that you remember, and then some that maybe jumped out at you when you rewatched it.
I didn't remember Duke coming out so hot and Carolina looking just really putrid offensively those first 11 minutes. I think they only had 10 points in the first 10 minutes of the first half, and they looked kind of a little bit shell-shocked. And, JJ Redick had come out. I think he was 4 of his first 5, and the cameras, the crazies are going wild, and Dick Vitale is screaming, and it was like, okay, this is how it's going to be today. And then it wasn't offensively; it was defensively and on the boards that North Carolina kind of got back into the game. No one played particularly well outside of Tyler Hansbrough. There were some good performances, but the guys they count on, like David Noel, didn't have a great game. He had 26 points against Virginia, and I think he had 8 against Duke. He did some things that were important, but offensively, he didn't do a ton. And that's something we'll talk about later, in that they got a lot of contributions from people they maybe didn't expect to get them from. And then Reyshawn Terry, I think he was 3 of 13 from the field. So those are 2 of your main guys, along with Hansbrough, who didn't give you a ton offensively, yet they still went in there and scored 83 points. So I think that was what jumped out to me, was that they got down by 10 really early and looked really bad offensively for the first part of the first half, and then just found a way through defense to get back into the game, and then kind of took it over in the second half.
Yeah, you were spot on about Duke coming out with a hot start. It were 13-3 Duke at the under 16, and Redick started just blistering hot. Dewey, what do you remember? Just the big things, the big takeaways that you had from that game?
If we're talking about what I remember from the beginning part of the game, we still had the same confidence, but JJ coming out and hitting those first 3, I do remember thinking and talking to my teammates like, well, if he's going to get 40, there may not be a whole lot we can do about this, because those were not all easy shots either.
Talk about Redick and Williams, the best tandem ever at Duke in terms of scoring.
Oh, a running jumper by Redick.
Is he on fire? Wow, somebody call the fire chief. He's burning up the nets already.
But he cooled off, and as you guys said, I think it even was 13-2 to start the game. And I remember being in the huddle at the under 16 and the under 12, and Coach Williams just telling us, guys, calm down. This is one of the biggest bullets they've got, is to start the game. The crowd's into it, then their best player hits 3 shots. We are fine. We are right where we want to be. Just do everything we tell you to do, and we're going to be in this game at the end. And that calm confidence, which is something you read a lot about and hear a lot about Coach Smith having, Coach Williams was just perfect in those moments because none of us outside of Dave had played significant minutes in an environment like that. It was so loud and so crazy, and the place was so amped to put their seniors out the right way. And then he comes out and goes bang, 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 hits 3 good shots. It was insane in there. I mean, the floor shakes when it gets that loud. But we hung in there and we stopped turning the ball over, got the ball into Tyler. We got JJ to miss a few shots. We rebounded the ball, got some buckets in transition. And all of a sudden, when you got into that kind of under 3 minutes, it was right around, 30-30. And so we were firmly in the game. We had taken JJ's initial haymaker. And as everybody knows, he went 2 for 19 the rest of the way and couldn't really get it going thanks to, in large part, Marcus's defense on him. So I just remember being so kind of proud and confident after we took that, like I said, haymaker, that first punch, and we were fine. There was no panic. Even Bobby, who had the ball in his hands so much, totally calm. Tyler never, really got too high or too low. He just kind of locked in and did his thing. But even the young guys, everybody was good. So it was, at least if we're talking about the first half, it was a wild start, but we settled in and we really grinded defensively. We took care of the ball better, got better shots, and we were right in it. We knew it.
Duke started so fast, so emotional, and then kind of the air went out of it a little bit. Now Carolina's right back in the game.
Good point. North Carolina really athletic. They get up and down the floor, and you got to just love their guy in the middle. And they got people you got to respect on the perimeter who can make shots, and then you got to deal with the big guy in the post.
Redick through a double team, and Williams trying to keep it alive, and now Carolina again with an opportunity to lead. Quentin Thomas, Dockery on him. Thomas to the rack, and Carolina's got the lead.
That's not the same kid I watched earlier in the year. He's a totally different player. His body language, his court savvy, he has elevated his game.
That's a great point when you talk about the calm feeling. When I was rewatching it, I noticed just specifically, when you're talking about a freshman, Bobby Frasor, and Quentin Thomas too, who, was kind of up and down in his career as a ball handler. Both of those guys during that game had some moments where they looked very calm. I mean, they of course had turnovers, but they looked smooth with their handle. I'm glad you mentioned that calmness because I think it is something that is probably a little easier when you have a younger team and a veteran Hall of Fame coach in that type of environment that he can kind of just rein them in because they don't really know any differently. Dewey, how did you guys feel? Once that calm had set in. You mentioned that around 3 minute mark. When did you guys feel like, okay, now we can start playing. We can really start letting it all hang out and doing what we want to do. At what point did you really notice that?
Yeah, really those first 10 minutes of the second half were still really back and forth. Like we had a great conversation at halftime. Things we needed to clean up. We needed to get the ball inside a little bit more, get Tyler the ball in positions to be successful. And that would open up more outside shots, which you saw we made a couple big threes in the second half. Clean up a couple things defensively. We're doing a great job on JJ, obviously. And really, though, it was back and forth those 10 minutes to start the second half. And then we made our run where Tyler had a couple buckets. Q had a couple great passes to Byron running. One was a penetrating little dump off. One was on the break. And we kept getting stops. That was the key. And we kept getting stops and we kept getting the rebounds. We weren't really giving up many offensive rebounds to them. And we pounded them on the glass. Maybe not pounded them, but we out-rebounded them by like 10 or something that game. And you take Sheldon away, we crushed them on the glass except for him. So we were limiting them mostly to one shot on each possession. JJ couldn't get anything going. And we were pounding the ball inside to Tyler. And as good as a defender Sheldon was, he wanted no part of dealing with Tyler every possession. We kept going to him and kept going to him. And, he was terrific from the free throw line, 8 out of 9. I just pulled up the box score. And it was that stretch right around the 10-minute mark where it went from back and forth, up 2, down 1 to up 8. And we got our spread. And that's when you could tell that they got shook and they got nervous, because there was no point in their minds, just like ours, where they ever thought they could lose that game. Not on that floor, not with those guys, not with JJ and Sheldon, not on senior night. And all of a sudden they look up and they're down 8, and Coach K has to call timeout. And the place is quiet. And Coach Williams says in the huddle, I can just talk to you in a normal voice. Listen to how quiet it is. And then back to, being in it, what we have to do, how do we finish, blah, blah, blah. But it got really quiet at that point. And that's when you knew that, at least in my opinion, that we had him.
That's an awesome point about, Sheldon not wanting to have to guard Tyler every time down. There was a sequence in the second half where Sheldon, I think, had picked up a foul, and they put Josh McRoberts on Tyler, and you could tell he could not hang with Tyler from a footwork perspective. Like it was just a quickness thing, but Tyler was just eating him alive every time he had to play on ball defense. Sherrell, when did you actually feel like that okay, this is a UNC game to lose? At what point in the game did that really click for you? And did you feel that in the rewatch, or did you still feel like, oh, this is tough?
When was it a UNC game to lose? When they were up and DeMarcus Nelson hit a 3, and then there were some crazy shots taken, and then DeMarcus Nelson hit another 3, and then there was another crazy shot taken, and Lee Melchionni had a layup, and before you knew it, Duke had the ball down 3 with a chance to tie the game. I was like, I was watching it, and I was like, you know what? This hasn't changed. We just saw this in February, and this is 14 years ago. And the same thing was happening then, is that Carolina goes to Cameron and they build up a double-digit lead and everything's looking great. And then for whatever reason, I don't know, I'm not smart enough to tell you. I'm just observing. Duke starts driving and kicking, and they hit a couple of threes, and then there's game pressure on Carolina that wasn't there. And before you know it, Bobby Frasor has to step up and hit free throws, or who knows what might have happened. So, when did I think that Carolina was going to win is when Bobby Frasor hit that free throw that put him up 4. When did I think that it was a game Carolina could lose is when they started giving up the lead in those last couple of minutes, because it just happened. It happened in a snap. I mean, they were up 10, I think, at the under 4, and then with 40-some seconds left, like I said, it was 77-74. Duke had a chance to tie. So for me, that's when it happened. I mean, that stretch that Dewey talked about was pretty phenomenal, because let me take a step back. When we talk about how Carolina wins these big games, it's always like, oh, that's a type of game that Coach Smith would have coached, or that's a Coach Smith Carolina victory. And what that means is people are doing smart things. People are contributing maybe who you might not expect. And then guys who you expect to are delivering. And so you had Tyler Hansbrough obviously hitting the 3, which everybody forgets was still, I think it was like 4 minutes left. That surprised me because I thought it was closer towards the end of the game. So you have him hitting the 3, him going at Sheldon Williams and kind of scoring at will. You have Quentin Thomas I think he hit 3 jumpers or maybe 2 jumpers in the game, and dishing off, like Dewey said, to Byron Sanders, who had 4 points. You have Marcus Ginyard like getting a rebound and just going full court and finishing with his left hand as a freshman, in that spot. In that spot. You have just people just doing good things maybe who you didn't expect. It was a team win. And so that's, to me, that was kind of the takeaway in that, is that, it was one of those where everybody had to do something constructive for North Carolina to win. It took every single person. Wes Miller played some really good defense on Greg Paulus, and then again on JJ Redick. He had him, I think, a couple of possessions. So all that, to me, kind of tied up in there. And so that's why it was so strange when the lead kind of went away. So back to your original question, that's when I thought that they would win, was when Bobby Frasor hit that free throw to put them up 4.
Before you get to the NCAA seedings, keep in mind what North Carolina's playing for tonight. They're playing for the number 2 seed in the ACC tournament, so they can avoid Duke's side of the bracket in Greensboro. They're 23 seconds and change away from that. They've got a freshman at the free throw line from Blue Island, Illinois, who has not gone to the stripe tonight, but is a 76% free throw shooter. Can he handle the pressure of the Cameron Crazies? Yes.
He looked pretty good right there. He's got a nice touch from the perimeter as well.
Now it's a 2-possession game.
And an ACC tournament's still going to be dynamite. May not have the unbelievable talented teams in the past, but you're still going to have some competitive super basketball. John Swafford and Freddie Barrett got through a phenomenal job with that tournament.
Frazier got them both.
Good job by Frazier, stepping to the line, converting.
it was weird, and Dewey, you hit on this a second ago. It went from like the 15 to 13 minute mark in the second half was just absolutely nuts. It was back and forth. It was two heavyweight fighters throwing big time punches. And then Bobby Frasor hits a three from the corner that puts Carolina up by one. That's the last time that gives Carolina the lead for good. Duke would tie it again, but they would never regain the lead. And then what Dewey was saying, that under 8 to under 4 mark, and actually till about 3:10 when Tyler hits that ridiculous three, it was really just looked like Carolina's aggression versus Duke not, for lack of a better term. Dewey, a lot of times in games like this, especially Duke Carolina, there's always a controversy. From a guy that's been in the huddle, were there any controversies in this game that you can remember?
It's a great question. Not that I can recall. It really was a pretty clean game from that respect. I don't remember ever feeling like the refs made any calls that didn't go our way that were egregious. Coach was great about kind of training us that good teams beat bad refs. There's going to be calls. They're not going to like them. They're not going to go your way, but good teams overcome that. So we were always of the mind that you just play through that stuff. But I don't remember being incredulous about anything that was or wasn't called really in the game, which is great. I don't recall that. What I do recall, and what Rel was just talking about, is when that stretch when we obviously felt like we had the game in control, and then DeMarcus hit that first three, then Melky had a layup. When DeMarcus hit the second three, the entire building was shaking. I mean, you can picture on TV where I was on the bench, in the bottom right-hand corner of your TV screen, and we're inbounding the ball in the top left corner of your TV screen. And I'm looking at, I want to say it was Dave inbounding the ball, and he is shaking. Like, I'm looking straight at him, and he is bouncing up and down in my vision because of how insane it was when they cut it to three. It was nuts. Never been anywhere, any arena I was in, anything like that exact moment. Not the Smith Center, not Rupp, nowhere. That was insane. And so for us to be able to come out of that stretch, I think right after that is when Bobby got fouled. It might have been a back and forth because he made that, and then we called timeout, and we set up our press break. And I think and then we turned it over. Dockery missed the layup. Tyler gets the rebound.
Yes.
And that's what it was. And then we pass the ball around, and eventually Bobby gets fouled. And the famous clip of Bobby on the telecast, they zoom in on his face, and you can see David Noel walk up to him and say something to him. And he walks up to him and says, "Hey, it's Bobby's world," kind of making hearkening back to that stupid cartoon when we were kids. and you see Bobby look at him and say, "Bobby's world," and kind of give that smirk smile, and then rip 2 free throws. And that's the fun stuff. That's the inside stuff that you remember. But it shows how confident of a kid Bobby was as a freshman. I mean, he went on the rest of his career. He fought injuries and everything. He finally got healthy by his senior year and was a major contributor on the national championship team. I'm not sure people remember how good he was as a freshman and how incredibly gifted he was at running our team. I mean, he was one of the biggest reasons. Tyler's the biggest, no question. But I remember, honest to God, guys, I remember that summer when all the pros came back and playing pickup and being in the locker room. And I don't know why Bobby wasn't there when we had this conversation. I remember some of our guys that were in the league saying, "Bobby's a pro. That's an NBA player," because he was that solid and that gifted and that well thought of. And then his body just didn't hold up the way you would have hoped. So anyway, just the confidence that he had to step up in that moment and rip those 2 free throws to put us up 5, which essentially up 5 under 20 seconds, let's put aside this year's game. You're going to win that game, and you should. And it just was a tribute to how many minutes he had played and that coach had trusted him in so many situations that by the time he got to the last game of the regular season, he's essentially a sophomore or a junior. I mean, running a point guard, running point at Carolina, for 30 games, by the end of your first year, you're an upperclassman based on what you've experienced. And he made those 2 huge threes. He made the free throws. He ran the team. I mean, guys, I can't emphasize enough how good he was and how integral to our success that year Bobby was.
Frazier was second in the ACC in assists that year as a freshman. And even in times where it may have led to a turnover in this game, he never looked rattled. And I think that dovetails nicely to what you were saying, Dewey. Now, you just gave us a really good, warm feeling about, kind of some positive things, specifically about Bobby and things that were said on the free throw line. But I'm going to guess that Rel probably can think of a controversy from that game that he might want to share with us from his perspective. Rel, you got one?
Yeah, it was late in the game. North Carolina is beating Duke. Tyler Hansborough has dominated the competition, and he's hit in the face by a Duke defender. Not the game you're thinking of. This happened in the 2006 game.
Sean Dockery, yes.
Yeah, so it's 81-76. The game is essentially over. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 seconds left, and Hansborough goes up for a rebound, and I think it was Sean Dockery, just mad because he's losing, grabs for the ball, and instead of grabbing for the ball, kind of hits Hansborough in the face, and then he realizes it's Hansborough's face, and then you see him extend and knock Tyler to the ground, and that's when Tyler gets up and looks, pretty like he's ready to go at him. But I mean, that should have been a flagrant foul, and I don't, rewatching it,
I don't remember that at all.
Yeah, rewatching it, I'm like, how was this not a flagrant foul on Duke? I mean, he hit him in the face and he extended his arm, and it was clear as day for everyone to see. And you see the frustrated look on the guy's face. So I was a little surprised, especially considering the officials in that game, who have been known to get some attention. I was surprised that they didn't take that opportunity to use that situation for attention. So that, to me, maybe not quite controversial, but it definitely should have been a flagrant foul looking back at it, 14 years later.
I don't remember that at all. Can you guys imagine how frustrating it must have been to play against Tyler?
And a 4-point lead now, so it's 2 possessions. And it looks like Carolina, 10 years after the last time they were able to beat Duke on senior night, a decade later, they're going to be able to do it again.
You don't want to foul here. You don't want to foul. Stop the clock. Let him shoot the basketball.
3-pointer is way short.
It's over. It's celebration of
Whoa, and look out. Hansborough goes down as Dockery had a hand in his face. I think inadvertently, but Hansborough's upset. He's being called by his teammates. Carolina's going to win this game. 1.1 seconds remaining.
And I'll tell you one thing. The scoreboard's going to make him mighty happy when he looks at the board. And he looks tomorrow. A little push, he definitely shoved him. Yes, he shoved him down. The best is just step away, go to the line, convert, look at the scoreboard, and leave, and get back to Chapel Hill with a W.
The disbelief on the Duke bench, and J.J. Redick and Sheldon Williams and 4 other seniors. Senior night's going to be spoiled by their arch rival from 8 miles away in Chapel Hill. Hansborough is going to be the hero of the night over on Franklin Street and in Chapel Hill, and he might be a hero there for 3 more years.
I obviously know it in some way in practice and whatever, but that's different. To deal with him for 40 minutes, and it doesn't surprise me that people went at him and swung at him as much as they did. I mean, just the most relentless competitor and so physical that you probably just got so tired of dealing with him, and you put on top of that you're going to lose your senior night and blah 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 blah. And it's not a shock. I don't remember, like I said, because we were already kind of on our way to winning at that point, I guess. But
I think too, Dewey, the other part that probably frustrated people is that when you're trying to antagonize somebody, the thing that gets you upset the most is when they don't respond. And for the most part, like I said, he got up off the ground really quick, but the game was over. There was no risk of Carolina losing. There's no risk of him doing anything to hurt the team. So I think that factored into it. But if you do that and the person doesn't respond, that gets really frustrating, because the whole goal is to kind of get under the skin. And if they don't let you under their skin, then, I think you see you lashing out. So between him just, giving them 27, them losing that game, after having just lost to Florida State, and maybe realizing that a national championship wasn't their birthright, was something that they were going to have to earn. I think all that was playing into the situation, and that he was a freshman. Here comes this freshman from the Midwest who, doesn't, necessarily look like he should be the best player in the country. But here he is, having scored 40 points earlier in the season, dropped 27 on, at Cameron, and really showing that he belonged. And to me, when we start talking about stretching it out and looking at larger storylines, that was it. Like, I knew two things I knew after that game. One, because so I have a lot of friends who have been who are old enough to have experienced 3 North Carolina national championships, and the prevailing wisdom is the year after, like, whatever, you just won the national championship, do something good, just don't be terrible, whatever. But after that game, I really started to hear like repeat whispers, because they had a stud in the post, they had experience on the wings, they had a point guard who could run the team, and was like, well, maybe they can do this. And that was the first time for me that I even entertained the thought that they could possibly do it. Now, we know what happened, but to me, that said they were there. And the other part of it was the freshmen, I think, scored 55 of the 83 points, or 56 or something. And it was kind of a moment that said, this is Roy Williams' second full class at North Carolina. And if these guys stay, it's their time now. To me, that's what it said, because Sheldon was leaving, JJ Redick was leaving. Duke had some solid recruiting classes, but there wasn't much other competition in the ACC outside of Duke for UNC. And it was like, man, if those guys stay 4 years, who knows what they might do? And they ushered in, maybe, if not the best, one of the best 4-year stretches that Carolina's ever had. And that's saying something, because it's Carolina basketball.
Yeah, I think there's a lot at play there, Sherrell, and I do, back to your point about the controversy, I think there was definitely a bat signal sent up for both Carl Hess and Teddy Valentine on that, what should have been a flagrant that they didn't respond to. But I'm with both you guys. I think it was absolutely kind of one of the first times that we got to see Hansbrough at his most Hansbrough-esque, since that he's just 40 minutes of just terrorizing, an upperclassman who had All-American accolades, who was at home on his senior night. I think you guys are absolutely spot on about that. This is a part of the show where, Dewey, this is new for you, so I'm gonna go to you first. What was your timeless highlight of this game? And if it's something that's already come up in conversation, take a chance and just kind of hone in on it for a little bit for the listeners.
I think the easy answer is Tyler's 3, but the plays that really stick out for me, that I just remember so vividly, and I don't know if it's because these are a couple of the guys I'm closest to or whatever it is, but Bobby's 2 threes on the wing and Marcus's full court push and layup. Those ones really stick out to me as just such huge critical plays in 40 minutes of an abundance of huge and critical plays. Those, and then I also remember the feeling maybe midway through the second half of being like, oh my God, Sheldon can't guard him. Like he can't, he wants nothing to do with him. And you could see it. And, when they came down, and Tyler was great at establishing post position in early offense. He'd run the floor so well. And then he was great at really, giving that first blow, make the first physical interaction with the guy who was guarding him to try to get his post position. And it's back to what we were talking about. It's, from the tip to the last second, every time you're near Tyler, you're getting hit. And it's like a boxing match, right? By the late rounds, you're getting punch after punch after punch. You start to give in, and you could see an All-American, a guy who was a top 10 pick later that year, Tyler broke his will. I know he still had a great game statistically and everything, but he did not want to deal with Tyler for 1 second more. And you could see it. And we kept going to him. And just, if you unpack that for a second, that we had that feeling on the bench. Like, I remember turning to my teammates and turning to our strength coach and being like, he wants nothing to do with Tyler. He wants nothing to do with him. And that's amazing. He was, Tyler's 18, 19. Sheldon was a senior. And so those are the things that stick out for me. Bobby's threes, Marcus's layup, and I should say Marcus's defense all day on JJ and having him go 2 for 19 after making those first couple. But that just Tyler broke Sheldon's will and was so relentless and was so clearly the best player on the floor and carried us. As you guys were talking about, laid the groundwork for, for my money, is arguably one of the top 5 careers in NCAA history. Am I biased? Of course. But Numbers don't lie.
J.J. Redick started off 4 for 5. He's 1 for his last 14 from the floor. His team trails 72-64. Sheldon Williams free throw upcoming. Our Cisco Systems game track looks like this. Hansbrough's been sensational. 50% on his 19 points. The freshman youth being served by Carolina with 44 combined points. Sheldon Williams trying to go for 15 and 15 right now at the free throw line.
You know, Brad, we saw the fact that J.J. Redick has really been shut down. Are you ready for this? The last 4 games now, he's 23 for 78. Wow. That's not J.J. Redick, the kid we watched all year.
Sure is.
That's a kid emotionally, I really believe, fatigued. And plus defenses are playing him a lot tougher.
8-point North Carolina lead at the 3.5-minute mark. Trying to pull a shocker at Cameron.
Taking some time off that clock. They're going to go for the high percentage shot.
Green slipped down, but kept the ball in play.
You want to get good spacing here. They're going to allow Duke to give a lot of help on the basketball.
2 on the shot clock. Hansbrough way out. Got it! A three-pointer!
Are you serious? They're celebrating on Franklin Street, baby. Down at Chapel Hill with that one.
Dad is celebrating in the stands behind the scorer's table. Redick misses, and a whistle and a foul.
Numbers are facts. Numbers are interpretable, but they don't have slant or emotion behind them. Rel, what was your timeless highlight, man?
So it's 2 things, and I don't know if I would call them highlights. Maybe they were just things I remember vividly. But and I'm not. Again, I don't mean this as an attack on a player or anything. So please don't take it as that. But I was just reminded how confounded I am with Reyshawn Terry. Just a guy who oozes potential and oozes just the look of, this is an NBA player. I mean, he's 6'8", 6'9". He can run the floor. He can shoot threes. He's strong. He's fast. He's athletic. Just had everything, all the physical attributes that you could wish for. And, he hadn't played much before his junior season, and he averaged, I think, like 14 or 15 points a game. So it's not like he was terrible, but I feel like there was so much more that he could have done or just because he had so much talent. And during the game, I think he saw it. I mean, there were a couple of threes that just looked so pure from the top of the key, one in the first half, one in the second half. He had a really nice layup. Those were his 3 field goals. So that's the good side of it. You're like, man, this guy has it. And for me, this goes back to watching him back in the day playing for the Kappa Magic, if you want to go old school, back in 2001 with Chris Paul. There's an old message board thing that it's kind of like a little joke that everybody goes to see Reyshawn Terry and they come back talking about Chris Paul. At that point, Chris Paul wasn't well known, and Reyshawn Terry was the guy on the AAU team. So I'll say all that to say it was just weird because you saw so much of what he could do. And then what I contend is, just in my opinion, one of the worst shots in Carolina history. The under 2, I think it was the under 2 minutes left in the game. And Carolina's holding on to a lead. Duke is starting to charge. And he comes down the court from the left wing. And instead of slowing down, taking 30, 35 seconds off the clock, he pulls up for a jump shot and hits the side of the backboard. And about 4 seconds later, DeMarcus Nelson hits another 3. So to me, it was just like, man, it was the feelings that I have about Reyshawn Terry that came back. It was like, this guy could be so good, but he just wasn't able to put it all together for whatever reason. So that's one. And then the other thing is late in the game, we know Coach K is notorious for, working the rest a little bit. There's this great visual of Teddy Valentine in front of him. He's not yelling at Teddy Valentine. I think he was yelling at one of the other officials. And you see Teddy Valentine get in front of Mike Krzyzewski. He's just going, Mike. He's giving him like the parent look. And he's talking kind of like, hey, calm down. He's like, Mike. And then finally, Coach K calms down and goes back to the bench. So for whatever random reason, I remember the Reyshawn Terry miss and Teddy Valentine getting in front of Coach K like that. Those are 2 things that aren't necessarily highlights, but I'll always remember them.
Dewey, was there anything said after that Reyshawn shot that you remember that is podcast friendly that you can share?
Oh my God, it was one of the dumbest shots ever. What Rel said is right. I mean, he's one of the most gifted players and the most freakish athletes I certainly ever was around. It's an interesting tidbit. All those guys that won the national championship the year before and left, they nicknamed him LeBron. That's what they called him, like just in daily practice, weight room, all that stuff, because he was such a freak. in the weight room and going against them on the blue team as a guy that got limited minutes, that they would call him LeBron. So just tantalizing skill set, huge, 6'8", 6'9", whatever he weighed, 230 pounds, jump out of the building, beautiful pure stroke, and then could just do some things that were that would make you scratch your head. So I don't remember Coach, getting on him too much. More than he already did. I mean, he rode Reyshawn as hard as anybody that I played with, Reyshawn and Danny. And, so nothing that Ray Terry wasn't already used to getting, whether it was in the huddle or during a film session. But that was a lapse in judgment. That's for sure.
That's a very delicate way of putting it. I like that. I had never heard the LeBron story. Some good inside baseball there. We were kind of touching on this a little bit with the highlight talk. I think I know where you guys are going to go, but I always like to figure out, all right, when you hear analysts and talking heads on TV breaking down a game, they always want to say, well, this guy did this and this guy did that. Who was your this guy, Dewey, for this game against Duke?
I think you got to go Marcus. I mean, if you remember how the season went for him, he was in the starting lineup from day one. And he struggled through the middle part of the season. He struggled offensively, and to the point where Coach made a change and put Wes in the starting lineup. But you can see, looking at the box score, that even though Wes started, Marcus played 23 minutes of the 40 at the 2, and he was phenomenal. I mean, 4 for 8 from the field, 4 of 6 from the line, 4 rebounds, 12 points. I mean, 12 points out of Marcus at that point in the year was certainly a surprise. And then just absolutely lockdown defense on JJ. And his height and his length really bothered JJ because he was smart enough and agile enough to get around screens and be there on the catch. And I remember that from the scouting report. The biggest thing with JJ was be there on the catch. Because if you're not, it's going up and it's going in. But if you're there on the catch and he's got to hesitate or try to take a dribble, he was less lethal. That part of his game had evolved, and he got better off the bounce than he had been, but he was still, predominantly a catch and shoot or a catch one dribble guy and could rip it. And so Marcus did an unbelievable job of being there on the catch, staying down on shot fakes, and then his size and his length really bothered JJ. So for me, outside of Tyler, without question, Marcus was the player of the game.
Carolina back in front by 2 as we approach 9 minutes. Paul has picked up his dribble, gets it to Redick. Redick trying to get his man in the air and can't.
He can't get an open shot. They're right up in his face. They are rotating different bodies on him.
Pull up for Paulus. Missed a 3. The rebound is Carolina's and David Noel.
So for North Carolina, I think it's give 2. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to have like 5 guys on my this guy. But for UNC, I think it was Quentin Thomas and Byron Sanders. I mean, between the two of them, Byron Sanders played 5 minutes and had 5 points. Quentin Thomas hit 2 jump shots and had 6 points. So 11 points and 3 assists with 1 turnover from Byron Sanders and from Quentin Thomas. You don't expect to get that from them that season really ever, especially at Cameron Indoor Stadium on the stage that they were in. So I think they played really well in the limited minutes that they got, and that was important for UNC. On the Duke side, how I feel about certain players, but Lee Melchionni, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm watching the game, again, this is a different time, so objective journalist now and all that good stuff, but back then I wasn't. So I'm sitting on my couch in Chapel Hill, and I'm like, are they going to let Lee Melchionni beat them the same way I was about the guys from Kentucky when we were talking about the 2017 game? He's wide open, hitting threes. I think he had 3 threes in the first half. He ended up like 13 or 15 points, and it's like, if J.J. Redick beats you, fine. If Sheldon Williams beats you, fine. Even if DeMarcus Nelson beats you, that's okay. But not Lee Melchionni. Like, he had been around, he had done some stuff, he hit some threes, whatever. It was just a little frustrating that, one, he kept getting wide open shots, and to his credit, he knocked them down. But that's just not the way you wanted that game, in particular, to go. Just because I like losing to good players, losing to the best players. You don't want to lose to someone who maybe had the game of their career, or someone who just stepped up in a clutch moment and maybe did something they don't usually do. So that was a little annoying from my perspective, and that's why he was kind of this guy from Duke, from a Carolina perspective, that game for me.
All right, fellas, you've done a really good job thus far of saying how you feel about things, specifically you, Dewey. So let's lay down on the therapist's couch. Let's open up. What were your feelings rewatching this game? Specifically, what did rewatching this game make you feel, Dewey? Maybe was it something that you didn't remember the first time?
So, what's really interesting is obviously we're all in quarantine and stuck at home. So myself and a lot of the guys that were in this game are in really regular communication, even more than we normally are. And we've been doing a lot of Zoom calls and just getting together to, get each other through it. Right? That's what everybody's doing in their own way. So what's great about this is we had a Zoom call a couple weeks ago, and one of the questions that was posed was, what was your favorite game during your career? And it was Tyler was on there, Bobby, Wes, me, Marcus, one of our managers, and then Eric Hoots, who's on staff and was on staff back then. And we all went around and we talked a lot about this game, and we talked a lot about this team and how together we were, how it was completely egoless, and we defended, we shared the ball, we listened to coach, and we also talked about how shocking it was the way our season ended, because we were better and had a chance to make a good run had we not run into what obviously ended up being a miracle couple weeks for George Mason all the way to the Final Four. We felt like we had a shot to really do some damage in the tournament. And it was because of those things I said, because of the way we played together, because of the way we defended, because we had great leadership. We had a force inside. We shot the ball pretty well. We had good guys coming off the bench, and Marcus and Danny. We were just a confident group, and it was for the right reasons. It wasn't because of egos or necessarily being, loaded with talent like we were the next year. There was just something about the way that team connected, and that's a year-by-year thing. And Coach did such a masterful job. And I know that 06 team is one of his favorite teams, which is really cool. And I would also say that a lot of the guys on that team are still some of the closest of anybody, and still some of the closest players with the coaches still of anybody, which says a lot about that team. I mean, Coach Haas, Coach McGrath, Coach Robinson, Coach Holliday, our strength coach. I mentioned Hoots, who's also on staff, our manager, Preston, all of us. I mean, there's a group of 12 of us, including Coach Williams and the coaches from that year, that are all really close. And it's really cool. And so that's what I was thinking about a couple weeks ago on our Zoom call. And then also I was thinking about kind of mentioning today is how I think Carolina fans will love to hear how close we still all are. And that was 15, 14 years ago. And we talk every day. I mean, yeah, a bunch of us have Peloton bikes and we compete. We did it today, talking junk to each other. So that part is really cool. And it's cliche to say that your favorite parts of being on a team or whatever are the off the court things and the stuff you remember in the locker room. But that's the stuff that's carried through. And we're now 14 years later. And a lot of the guys you see when you rewatch that game, we're still really close. And it's a really cool thing.
All right. I appreciate it. I didn't think that we'd get a Peloton drop in this podcast, but we'll leave it here. And I appreciate that authenticity from Dewey. It is cool to hear another example of what we've all come to know about the Carolina family and the Carolina way. Rel, what do you have? Anything that this made you feel, or anything that this may have stirred up for you?
So it's sort of a personal memory. Quick story. Like, I don't want to overstate my importance or anything, but I was fortunate enough to have some level of access when I was a student at Carolina, and then subsequently worked in the athletic department. And so the day of that Duke game, me and a group of friends were in the Smith Center playing pickup. And Joe, you probably know a few of these people. They may frequent Carolina football games. But, we were in there, we were playing, having a good time, thinking we're big shots or whatever. And this is probably maybe 1 or 2 o'clock. And out walks Coach Williams. And we're thinking, okay, we're going to get busted. He's going to throw us out. So he just, stands there in the tunnel and looks for a little while. And then we're like, okay, we need to wrap this up because I don't want to get in trouble. And, we don't want it to cause anything. And so we're walking out. We walk by him and we go, hey, Coach Williams, how you doing? Good luck tonight. And he goes, I sure as heck hope we look better than you guys looked out there tonight. And we all just started busting out laughing because here is this guy, his just winning a national championship, a huge game that night. And he's just chill, making jokes, laughing at us playing basketball. So to me, I don't want to say like, oh, I knew or anything, but he just seems so relaxed to be going into like the tempest that is Cameron Indoor Stadium for that kind of game. And I was like, man, this guy's really cool if he knows or if he's that chill in this situation. So that's what I remember. And then just the night afterwards, just about how, like I said earlier, it seemed like a changing of the guard from Sheldon and JJ to kind of Tyler. And this was going to be his conference for as long as he stayed in the conference. And it was because, the next year Elite Eight, the year after that Final Four, the year after that national championship. So it definitely kind of foretold what he would become and what the team would become with him.
Yeah, and it also shows that no matter what was on the docket for the day, that Coach Williams just could not leave and could not go to Cameron without telling you all how bad your games looked. As we get close to the end here, is there anything you guys want to leave as we're wrapping up? Dewey, is there anything you feel can't be left unsaid that you want to throw out there?
Obviously the locker room afterwards, and it's become more prevalent and popular now with social media that everyone has now seen what Coach Williams does when he enters the locker room after a big time win. But back then people didn't know that, right? That was kind of one of our things, that the anticipation of him coming off the court after probably doing an interview or whatever he had to do when you just had a big time victory, was you waited kind of with bated breath for him to come in so everybody could jump around. And it was one of the coolest, funnest things that you could ever experience, could have experienced, I should say. So obviously I vividly remember that. I remember him standing up there and saying, we knew in this room, we knew we were going to win. No one else thought that we could do it. We knew. And that was such a validating feeling. I remember when the media came in, just the elation of the room and how fun that feeling is. And then I remember getting back to Chapel Hill and going out on Franklin Street that night. And I'm going to harken back to what I was talking about on our Zoom call. One of the other questions that my friends, teammates, and I talked about was, if you could relive one night in college, what would it be? Whether it was tied to a game or not. And that night is one of the nights we also talked about during that conversation. It's just one of the most memorable, most fun, just because everywhere you went, the place was electric. They were obviously so excited to see us. And it just was, it's what college is all about, right? I mean, that's the stuff that you cannot get unless you stick around. And so for all the guys that are so talented and, the one and done thing, and now maybe guys can go straight to the league from high school and that's coming back, blah, blah, blah. That's the stuff that you cannot replicate, you cannot get anywhere else. And I was so lucky as a walk-on just to be able to be there and be the littlest part of it, to experience what it was like to go in there and win, do it when it felt like David versus Goliath, us against the world, all those things. And then what it was like after that to experience the celebration and what it was like on campus and all those things. That's the stuff that you remember forever. I mean, I'll be able to vividly talk about this 50 years from now. And that, is the essence to me of college sports, and then being able to do it at a place like Carolina where basketball is so important, and have it have been a game against Duke at their place with all the stuff we've talked about, all those things, just, one of the better days you can say of your life, from my perspective. Really cool.
All right. You guys heard it. And that's, I don't know of another way to go home on this episode before we go to the break. I think that's a heck of a wrap up by Dewey and a great way to frame all what we all know about Duke Carolina games. But I love Dewey's notice about how it made him feel as a college student and a college player and just the essence of college. So I think we'll leave that. I want to say I appreciate Rel and you, Dewey, for being here. Coming up right after the break here, we're going to have a little one-on-one conversation, what I like to call the postgame, with the aforementioned Bobby Frasor, freshman point guard starting his first game in Cameron. That's a heck of a topic to talk to somebody about because there's only a few people on this planet that have had an opportunity to do that, much less had as good of a positive outcome as Bobby did. So we're going to talk to Bobby Frasor right after this break. Hope you guys will stick around, and we'll be right back here on the Throwback podcast on InsideCarolina.com. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the Throwback here on Inside Carolina, InsideCarolina.com. And as I teased before the break, I have with us a guy that was a heck of an impact player, even though he was a bright-eyed freshman in 2006. Bobby Frasor is on with us. Bobby, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Excited to talk about this game.
Yeah, it was certainly an exciting time for you guys, and I think Dewey just really hit the nail on the head when he was talking a little bit earlier just about how much of an impact you had on that team in that season, being that so many of you guys were new to the program. Y'all kind of came in and bought in what Coach was selling you, and it may or may not have culminated, at least from my view, it culminated with this game at Duke on their senior night. What was your lasting memory from this game? When we threw it out to you and said, hey, do you want to talk about this? What was the first thing that you thought about this game at Duke on senior night?
The first thing that came to mind was like, that's an easy game to talk about because I would say it's hands down the game I've seen the most, after playing, rewatching. It's on every year, on ESPN Classic or something when, Duke and Carolina are playing. So it's still a lot of the plays and things that happened are fresh in my mind. Once you ask the question, probably one thing that comes to mind that is lasting from that game would have been David Noel after the game in the locker room. Just seeing his, I don't know if it was disbelief or, kind of had this, you guys have no idea what you guys just done type of feel. And so, it was just really, really cool to be freshmen and go over there and shock the world on their senior night.
You mentioned David and his reaction. He is the upperclassman on that team. I'm sure he was shocked, but one of the things that Dewey kind of teased with us, and I want to get your insight on it, he felt like Coach Williams made you guys think by the time that game started that it was just a foregone conclusion you were going to win. Do you remember that? And how did you process that?
Yeah.
And as a freshman on the team walking in?
No, I think nobody gives him credit for his motivational tactics. He's just everything he says is so confident, so matter of fact. Like whatever he says, you just take his word as gold. And so I remember, I think it was Virginia. It was our last home game, maybe senior night. We beat them, and then I think after the game, he rallies everybody together and says, "Hey, nobody in the country can go over there and beat them, but this locker room, what we have in here, we can." And everybody just kind of takes that to heart, and then just has a belief, like a confidence, where I don't think any of us were scared. Obviously, myself, I could say I was nervous, and it was a crazy atmosphere, and first time in that environment. But he definitely had us all believing that we were going to go over there and win.
So you mentioned that environment. Let's talk about that a little bit. As a guy who, you're wrapping up your first season as a starting point guard at the University of North Carolina, you've seen a lot, but a lot of people talk about how the Duke environment and their home crowd is just different. What do you remember about that night and, your first time walking in there? What jumps out at you?
I mean, you remember driving up, you're kind of winding up this hill straight to Cameron Indoor. They drop you off right outside, and there's just this long line of people, almost like a high school game. And they're already doing the waving at the bus and booing and stuff. And then you change and you walk out on the court. And it's just so tight, like from sideline to the fans being on top of you to walking through basically the crazies. And it's just a rush as soon as you walk out there. It's unlike anything I've been a part of or seen as a spectator. And it still gives me goosebumps to this day thinking about the first time walking out there.
That's awesome. And the thing is, you played a pretty solid freaking game considering all things told, and how that environment was, and all the hoopla and pomp and circumstance around their senior night. At what point do you feel like you were comfortable, after the game started? When did you feel like, oh, this is good, I feel fine, and you felt like you were able to block all that out? When did you notice that?
Yeah, I think it was Dave's first dunk. I remember early on, you're just so nervous about bringing the ball up the court, not turning it over, and Duke's just notorious for pressuring you and denying first pass and things like that. And then there was like a loose ball. I remember gathering at half court and pitching it head to Dave, and Dave got a dunk, and that was like, okay, like, all right, we're actually going to score. It's not impossible. Like, that kind of just settled you down. But then you go back and you watch it, and I still had some bonehead plays late, but obviously that's some freshman type mistakes. But it was, that dunk was definitely when I was like, okay, all right, we're okay.
Big time point in the game, definitely. I teased it a little bit earlier, but I would love to hear your perspective on it. A lot of folks feel like this team really kind of hit their peak as far as coming together and everybody buying in, which makes sense for a team that was as young as you guys were at that point. Do you feel like that this game was probably you guys' peak maturation for that season?
Yeah, is definitely the highlight of the year. We had some other big wins and, NCAA tournament win, but as a 3 seed, you wish you could have went a little further. But it was cool going into that year, having zero expectations for the team after winning it last year. I remember walking back after a football one game and, maybe it was late at night. I'm just walking with some random guy and he's like, football just lost. I'm like, oh yeah, at least hoops is around the corner. And he had no idea who I was. And he's like, oh yeah, we're going to be bad in basketball as well this year too. And so there was just no expectations at all. And then for us to have a very successful year and be a 3 seed and that game was definitely the peak of the season. And it was just a memory that I'll never forget. And hopefully a lot of Carolina fans, look back at that game and really enjoy it.
You had a heck of a career at UNC, but was this your most fun season?
Yeah, I mean, I to start every game and you're playing a ton and not have injuries, it was an absolute blast. Like winning the national championship, that was, we were just beating the brakes off people, that year, and that was a lot of fun. And the guys that we had on the team were just amazing personalities and amazing talent, and so that was a lot of fun. But yeah, looking back to that freshman year, playing a ton, being a part of it, and having success, that was definitely a very, very fun year.
One of the things that we talked about earlier was about, JJ Redick and JJ Redick and JJ Redick and all the hype around him, rightfully so. Guy was an amazing player. But coming to this game, he started off really, really hot. I think he finished the game like shooting 2 of 19 or something. And
Yeah.
you guys put the clamps on him. And I noticed it was a team effort. You trailed him some. I think Marcus Ginyard was on him some. Danny Green was on him some. David Noel was on him some. You guys did an amazing job of really making, anybody not named Redick kind of inconsequential that game. And you took Redick away. Do you remember what coach's mindset was for you guys, or what your instructions were when you were guarding JJ to get him out of his typical performance?
No, I mean, I know the first time we played him, he had like 35 on us, and I probably tagged him a little bit of that. Wes caught a good brunt to that, and then I know in the second go around, obviously maybe we made a conscious effort to put a little bit more length on him and go with Marcus, who was a phenomenal defender. Reyshawn could be on him, Dave could be on him, Danny could be on him when he was in the game, and all those guys are 6'6" and above, and so maybe that got to him. I do remember he had a couple tough ones to start, but then by the end he was throwing it off the side of the backboard, and I don't know if they were talking about emotional fatigue and stuff that game. There was a lot of storylines with him that year, and he was an amazing talent. But yeah, credit to Marcus and all the other guys that made his life it was a tough night for him.
Yeah, the announcers, mainly Mr. Vitale, did begin the "Woe is JJ" tirade early in the game that
Yeah.
night.
Yeah.
Okay, man, you had some amazing free throws, which were, again, coming from an outsider watching the game, seemed like would have been the biggest pressure cooker type situation one could imagine. But you had 2 free throws with 23.3 left. Dewey mentioned, and I was going to ask you, but Dewey jumped on this and said what David mentioned to you when he was standing on the free throw line when you were getting ready to shoot, and he said Bobby's world. Was that the first time
Yeah.
you had heard that?
Yeah, like I think he was just kind of messing with me. And it was after the first one had went in, like you can see in the video where I look at him and I kind of nod my head and just repeat what he had
Yep.
said to me. And that's when I have the little smile. But yeah, Dave was, just an amazing leader, amazing person to be around, such a fun personality that he'd always bring a smile to your face, even in a pressure cooker situation like that. And, so it was good to be able to step to the line and as a freshman and not shoot any free throws that whole game and make two big ones.
So the beautiful part of your career, yeah, you got a national championship out of it, but where does it rank the fact that you never lost at Duke in your career? Where does that fall on the list of Bobby's accolades as a Carolina player?
It's definitely number 2. I mean, even people to this day, it's like, oh, what was your record against Duke? And you bring it up, and everybody kind of takes a step, a second, like, wow, that's impressive. Like, it's ever been done before. And so it's, yeah, definitely national championship 1. That's probably number 2. And, national championship game is my favorite game. This is definitely my second favorite game that I was ever a part of and played in. So it's, they're right there hand in hand.
Look at the emotion on the youthful faces and even the moms and dads of the Carolina folks that got to see it. First win at Duke since 2001, but the first time a senior night upset since 1996. Quite a game. North Carolina was just faster to the ball most of the second half, and they win it 83-76. Dick, it's been fun to be part of prime time with you again, partner.
It's been fun, baby.
North Carolina's going to be a scary team the rest of the way.
We appreciate you spending some time with us and being so honest. Is there any one lasting thing that you feel like maybe a little peek inside the locker room, or whether it was a post-game celebration or maybe something that happened when you guys got back on campus and got settled in? Was there anything that really stands out at you in the celebration part of things from the post-game?
I think that was the year we of course you go out afterwards, and I think somebody, no one on the team, but it was somebody set their hair on fire. Like did I forget what they named the shot. We're at a bar. He throws liquor on his head, lights it on fire, takes a shot, and then pours a beer or water on his head. So like I'm a 19-year-old kid. Like what is going on? But it was that was a fun night for sure. I wouldn't have said that when I'm still in school, but whatever it is, 13, 14 years after the fact, I think we can talk about it.
Yeah, I think we've elapsed any statute of limitations on that. But
yeah.
I can't wait to hear from the guy who actually set his hair on fire. That's outstanding. Well, Bobby, I appreciate you taking time to jump in the Wayback Machine with us here on the Throwback. I want to give a special thanks to our guest Bobby Frasor. Let's hit one time before we let him go. Let's hit Bobby's box score for that night. His line was he was 3 of 9 from the field, 2 of 3 with some big 3-pointers, which I mentioned when we were talking earlier with Dewey and Sherrell that you hit the 3 that was the last time that gave UNC the lead for good, but finished with 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 big free throws at the end, 0 fouls, and 10 points. And for a freshman, that pressure cooker and that big of a game, man, that's huge stuff. So we're glad to have you come on and talk about that today. We really appreciate it. We want to give one more shout out to our friends at Johnny T-Shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Please visit them, check them out. If you need any Tar Heel gear, and to everybody in the listening audience, please go to johnnytshirt.com. They'll take care of you, quick shipping, all that good stuff. And want to remind you, be sure to go to iTunes or Google Play or wherever you're getting this podcast. Rate us, give us a review. If you like what you're hearing, please speak highly of us. If you don't, reach out to us at Inside Carolina and we'll take care of it. But that'll do it for me, for Bobby Frasor, for Sherrell McMillan and Dewey Burke. We thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you next time on the Throwback here on Inside Carolina.